This video is sponsored by Ground News. Just what is going on with Christianity these days?
Oh Lord! Oh, you are so big!
There seems to be a growing trend of public figures and intellectuals embracing the label of Christian without actually affirming any Christian doctrines and beliefs. Talk about a low commitment relationship with the Almighty. Take, for example, the OG Jordan Peterson, the immensely popular psychologist and self-help guru who's an expert in, well, everything, from climate change to gender to politics, religion, and genetics. Sure, experts are not very happy with him speaking utter bull, but what do they know, huh? They're just part of the big bad establishment.
You see the primary mother and father of humanity emerging from this underlying snake-like entity with its tails tangled together. I really believe that's a representation of DNA.
That is sheer bullshit, and I told him so.
Throughout the years on Rationality Rules, we've covered Peterson many times over, and one thing that he's famous, or infamous for, is championing alleged Judeo-Christian values and the Bible, insisting that they're essential for maintaining order and morality in society. Indeed, he takes great scriptural solace in the slavery that's been championed from St. Augustine in the 4th century all the way up until the Enlightenment. Oh no, he doesn't. That's somehow not Judeo-Christian, is it? It doesn't count. Okay, well, he's really upset with us going woke.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
For ending thousands of years of old men marrying little girls. Oh no, sorry, he's okay with that progressivism, and so somehow that's Judeo-Christian. Still, you get the point. Every value he likes is Judeo-Christian, whereas every value he hates is postmodern Marxism or what have you. And when pressed, Peterson is unwilling to clearly state whether he believes Jesus Christ was literally resurrected from the dead.
Well, do you believe that Jesus rose again from the dead? Literally.
I cannot answer that question.
Which is, the central tenet of the Christian faith. So he's a pretty odd Christian if he's a Christian at all. Or consider Ayaan Hirsi Ali, the Somali Dutch activist who recently discarded her atheism in a widely read article titled "Why I Am Now a Christian." Yet not once within her testimony did she mention Jesus, Christian doctrines, or personal experience, nor, anything to do with the religion. Instead, she focused on resisting Islam, Putin, and, of course, the woke.
Up yours, woke moralists.
Other figures, like Douglas Murray, the conservative British commentator, have followed a similar trajectory, defending Christianity as a key part of Western identity under threat while sidestepping the question of whether Christian doctrines are actually true in any literal sense.
I mean, it's from Christianity that we get the idea of rights.
To be fair, unlike Ali, Murray does not call himself a Christian, and to a large extent this is also the case for Peterson, but they all certainly sing the same tune. It doesn't matter to Murray, it seems, that under the dominion of Christianity until the last 70 years, so for well over 1,500 years, these sweet and gentle Christians would have had him castrated for being homosexual. Oh no, we need to defend Christianity because Judeo-Christian values.
All of these ideas, like the dignity of the individual, these come from the Judeo-Christian tradition.
So I ask again, what in Jesus' tomb is going on? What do we call these Christians? Well, I say we call this phenomenon Cuckoo Christianity, and its adherents Cuckoo Christians. Fitting, no? Just as cuckoo birds lay their eggs in other birds' nests to let them do all the hard work of raising the chicks, these cuckoo Christians hide under the Christian label and gain their cultural support, without believing in Christian doctrines. Continuing this trend, just last week we witnessed another grand conversion, Konstantin Kisin of trigonometry.
The atheism delusion.
He's graduated from being a mere atheist to enlightened, lapsed atheist, and he's here to warn us all about the grave dangers of the atheist delusion. And speaking of delusions, the United States, a country where there's no official religion, but the presidents swear into office with their hand on the Bible anyway, apparently needs a Christian Day of visibility. This is, at least, what twice impeached former President Donald Trump thinks. He promised to make November 5th Christian Visibility Day in response to President Biden recognizing Trans Day of Visibility this past Easter, despite Trans Day actually being commemorated every March 31st, so not Easter. Long story short, Trump was outraged that Biden would declare Easter Sunday Trans Day, sharing great offense alongside his Christian base, declaring it blasphemous. But the great thing about the story overviews that Ground News creates is that they're based on all the articles they can find covering the same topic, which in this case is 140 sources. This makes it easy to see what each political side is reporting. For example, the White House says that this was misinformation done on purpose, and the fake right-wing panic is part of Trump's push for Christian nationalism. They even have Biden's proclamation listed so that I can compare his official words with how the media framed it. It's this type of misinformation that's causing more and more polarization in the world, leading us to drown in outrage in our echo chambers. And this is why I'm once again working with Ground News. They're an app and website that prioritizes providing all the information you need, from insights into the source's political bias, to the credibility of their journalism, to the ownership of the outlet, all so that readers can stay up to date with the world in a balanced and objective manner. Ground News is a fantastic app for smashing the walls of your echo chamber, effortlessly helping you understand the news that you read, and indeed don't read. So, if you want to be an informed citizen, I highly recommend that you check out Ground News. Go to ground.news/rationality and see it for yourself. Or, alternatively, simply scan the code that you see on screen right now. Don't let media bias fool you. Get the full picture on Ground News. Thanks.
The Atheism Delusion. When asked about my religious views, I usually call myself an agnostic. But if I had to describe my views more accurately, it would be fair to say that I'm a lapsed atheist.
There are a few ways that the label atheist and agnostic are applied, but in the context of going from atheism to agnosticism, this would imply once believing that there's probably no God, to now believing that there's a fair chance that there is one. So what we might expect to hear is reasons as to why Constantine now believes there's a decent chance there's a god. Maybe it's the fine-tuning argument, a cosmological consideration, perhaps it's a moral disposition, maybe it's a personal experience. But no. Just like Peterson, Ali, and the other Cuckoos, we receive at best a purely pragmatic argument. Namely, Christianity is good for society, and so, ironically, we should delude ourselves into treating it as if it's true.
Born in the Mecca of non-belief that was Soviet Russia, my view of religious people as ignorant, obscurantist and doctrinaire was only reinforced by watching my comedy heroes, like George Carlin and Bill Hicks, take big and legitimate swings at the disconnect between the teachings of religion and the behavior of the religious.
If Constantine believed that all religious people are unintelligent, then he was bound to be surprised eventually. But most atheists are not so uninformed. We recognize that while there is a very strong correlation between intelligence and non-belief, there are certainly some highly intelligent individuals from all faiths. Painting all religious people with a broad bad brush, as Constantine admits to doing, is a delusion that he had, but it isn't entailed by atheism.
Hicks summed this incongruity up perfectly by recalling a story of three men approaching him after a gig in Alabama.
Hey buddy, we're Christians. We don't like what you said. I said, then forgive me.
Today, in a world in which the religious right has less obvious impact on our world, jokes of this kind would have little resonance.
Constantine's claim that the religious right has less impact today is of course true in the sense that they've lost a significant portion of their base. Christianity in the West, though still dominant, has suffered an astonishing reduction in membership. However, these jokes still resonate because the base remains large and, more importantly, very powerful. The immense influence of conservative religious groups is still extremely evident, particularly in the United States. Recent debates and legislation surrounding issues such as abortion rights and LGBTQ+ matters demonstrate that the religious right continue to exert significant pressure on public policy. A considerable part of Donald Trump's base explicitly votes for him due to religious reasons. So while Bill Hicks' jokes might have slightly less relevance, downplaying it, as Constantine has done, strikes me as deeply problematic. One of the biggest frictions with Abrahamic religion is, of course, creationism and evolution denial, but this debate still isn't settled. Make no mistake, we are still fighting this battle. A recent interview with Tucker Carlson went viral, in which he embodied the typical evangelical disposition on the subject.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution.
We've had full-on Discovery Institute creationists featuring on primetime television with Piers Morgan, and Dennis Prager has evidently managed to get his claws into Florida's education system, with PragerU kids now being taught to children.
This backdrop provided the perfect opportunity for the emergence of daring countercultural figures who could use their erudition, wit, and refreshing honesty to effortlessly take apart the tired old arguments for a religious worldview.
At this point, Constantine talks about the four horsemen of New Atheism.
They were cool.
He praises Richard Dawkins for books such as The Selfish Gene and The Blind Watchmaker, and Christopher Hitchens for obliterating the cowardice and embarrassment of apologetics. And I'll tell you one thing for sure, Hitchens would have slapped the shit out of these cuckoo Christians. Witnessing them label others deluded while insisting that we should willfully delude ourselves into Christianity would have given him great amusement. Anyhow, Constantine then praises Sam Harris for articulating various problems with Islam on Bill Maher,
only to be shouted down by Ben Affleck in what quickly became the talk of the internet.
And then Constantine says this.
The New Atheists were exciting because they were saying something new, challenging the dogma of their day and speaking truth to power. Not content with proving that religion wasn't true, they ventured further in attempting to prove religion was at best unnecessary and more likely harmful.
But wasn't that always the reason for the New Atheist movement? Wasn't this the essence of the entire thing? The Four Horsemen didn't emerge out of nowhere. They came together to take a stand against clerical bullying and the harmful effects of religious dogma on society. They each emphasized that the only way the harm done by religion could be justified is if it's true, insisting that women are subordinate to men and that homosexuals are abominations is evil if these scriptures aren't true. Sam Harris in particular highlighted the difference between religions and their potential impact on society. He explicitly stated that while Jains are not a cause for concern because the more fanatic a Jain is, the less you need to worry about them, on the other hand, Christians and Muslims certainly are a concern.
Same-sex attraction is a dysfunctional form of idolatry.
So the Quran never punishes people for feeling a particular way. It's always about acting in a way that is contrary to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded.
This is precisely because their beliefs have real-life consequences that can be detrimental to individuals and society as a whole, beliefs that are still having enormous impact today. This year, the US election may well pivot entirely on abortion rights, which evangelicals are fervently against because of explicitly religious reasons. So, to me, Constantine's statement indicates a misunderstanding of New Atheism. The New Atheists were never content with simply proving religion false. That wasn't the point. They always recognized the urgency of addressing the harm caused by religious dogma.
It was around this point that I began to lose my faith in atheism.
Right. So, let's pause here to unpack what Constantine is saying. His narrative is that he was convinced that there's probably no God, but upon hearing the Four Horsemen's arguments for why Abrahamic religion in particular is not just wrong but also causes a lot of harm, the probability he assigned to God's existence went up. You see, this is the issue with Cuckoo Christians and their religious discourse. Up until now, the discourse on theism versus atheism has revolved around theology, philosophy, and science. But these cuckoos are playing a completely different game. They're losing their faith in the proposition that there are no gods because, in this case, some popular atheists started expressing why religion is also harmful. This doesn't make sense.
The God Delusion was the last Dawkins book I read, and the appeal of that discussion went quickly for several reasons.
Okay, so here's another issue. The God Delusion came out after God is Not Great and many other New Atheist books. And so, are we to assume that Constantine didn't read the other books he's criticizing? Did he even digest their arguments of religious harm that caused his faith in atheism to shatter?
First, it was clear to me that to attempt to challenge Islamic extremists with facts and logic, as Dawkins, Hitchens, and Harris had done, was to fail on purpose.
On purpose? Really, Constantine? That's quite a claim, my dude. You're assigning nefarious intent as if they set out to deliberately fail. But let's think about this for a second. Are we to believe that Christians could be reasoned with via arguments such as pointing out that the Bible condones slavery and that there's glaring issues with the problem of evil, but Muslims are somehow immune to logical arguments? What nonsense. I mean, does Constantine think that there's no ex-Muslims out there who left their faith after engaging the very same critiques levelled by the New Atheists at Christians?
In seeking to liberate us from the tyrannical instincts of dogmatic Christians, the New Atheists actually delivered us into the hands of a different and far more pernicious religious zealotry, from which the ordinary citizen has no security at all.
Now, you might be thinking, what pernicious zealotry have we been delivered to that's worse than religious fundamentalism? Well, fortunately, Constantine gives us several examples.
One of the core claims of the New Atheists is that religion produced evils that were far worse than the body count of non-believers. Sure, Stalin, Hitler and Mao were bad, they argued, but they weren't motivated by their atheism or its holy book. This view of the Holocaust, Stalinism and the Great Leap Forward as accidental byproducts of a non-complicit atheism is, to me, a complete misunderstanding of the impact a lack of religious faith has on the way we think about other human beings.
Lumping Stalin, Hitler and Mao together as examples of bad people is more than fair, but doing so in the context of religion isn't accurate. I mentioned Prager and his propaganda earlier, and this serves as a good time to plug my video responding to him insisting that Hitler and Nazi Germany were atheistic. They weren't. What's with the pseudo-history? However, my purpose here isn't to debunk all of Constantine's claims. Rather, I want to focus on his core argument. That said, I probably will address his claims about Stalin and the Soviet Union another time, as they are a common source of misinformation, so let me know if you would like to see such a video. The other big bad boogeyman that Constantine points to is, following Ali, wokeism.
This new religion has just as little regard for the truth as the old ones. That's why Richard Dawkins, who spent his best years arguing with creationists, is now increasingly forced to explain basic biological concepts, like the inability to change your sex by incantation, on national television.
It never ceases to stun me that Constantine, and so many other pursuers of truth, can make so much content around the gender debate and yet still fail to represent their views accurately. To claim that believing that one can change their gender, not sex, gender, is a new religion whose proponents don't care about truth, is to embody the very traits that you're accusing others of having. Anyhow, let's get to the crux of Constantine's video. Here it is.
The central positive feature of the religious worldview is to ensure that human beings do not see themselves as the sole arbiters of truth and justice, that having torn God down from his pedestal, we do not put ourselves in his place.
Constantine's central claim, then, is that when we don't believe in God, we elevate ourselves to the throne of God, and since this entails atrocities, we ought to, what? Pretend that Christianity is true? As already said, the claim that the dictators and carnage of the 20th century are atheistic is pseudo-history. It's bollocks. But the ballistic bollocks is the words Constantine didn't say. His view assumes that the religious have a higher power to keep them in check. But do they? Really, consider Christianity alone. There are mutually exclusive and jointly exhaustive Christian divisions, Catholics, Protestants and Mormons, to name just a few, and each of them claim that its specific collection of doctrines has capital T truth. They have killed each other over such minor disagreements. And worse, it's been, and still is, all the more difficult to reason with them precisely because they're convinced that God Almighty is on their side. The same is true, of course, of the Church Fathers, who had radically different views from the majority of Christians today. They knew that slavery is kosher because God says so, and unlike modern woke Christians, they gave us receipts. There are tons of slavery-endorsing verses in the Bible, and they can't just be hand-waved away by saying Jesus said love thy neighbour. Yeah, Jesus also said, slaves, obey your master. But no, each Christian creates Christianity in her own image. That's why each Christian's intuitions, which are ironically shaped by Enlightenment values, just so happen to be what the big guy demands. A further irony here is that while encouraging us to embrace religion, the Cuckoo Christians are fearful of religion, namely Islam. On the one hand, they want to warn us not to do away with God, as if we have a choice. And on the other hand, they want us to fight against those who believe God is in their corner. They romanticize the Christianity of yesteryear without knowing enough history to recognize that it's modern Islam in all but label. Anyhow, in wrapping up, I just want to once again thank Ground News for sponsoring the channel and providing a means of retaining truth. And I'd like to say to Constantine, should he be watching this, should you be watching this, good sir, that it would be awesome to have a conversation. If you're able and willing, then please reach out. I'd love to make it happen. Thanks.